How's it going, everybody? You're listening to the Let's Talk podcast, the show that brings you the latest in relevant and current trends and conversations about our daily living, the Bible, and also some very fun and unexpected points of view. With your hosts, Joey Santos and Brad Wilson.
Okay, hey everyone, Joey Santos here with my leader, Brad Wilson. Man, it has been a while since I called you that.
It has been a while since you pulled that one out, but I'll start referring to you as the chief shepherd.
Not me.
Okay, maybe Alan.
Exactly. I know. Hey man, good to see you.
It's good to see you too. How was your trip?
It was good. Just spent the last few days in Atlanta at the Orange Conference. Mm-hmm. That's the curriculum we use for our student ministry, kids ministry. It was good. We learned a lot of good stuff, though.
Here's my question. One of the things they do, if you win the Orange Bowl, I know you follow different football, but American football, they give you a trophy. It's got a bunch of oranges in it.
Yes.
When you're going there, they celebrate the oranges. When you walked in there, did they give you like a bag of Mandarin oranges?
No, they don't. But they have their own thing they're going on. It was probably literally 10, 15,000 people in this arena for this conference. It was great. It was good. Great speakers. But it was interesting because I don't think they were prepared for the number of people coming in at once. So the first night, they had all the security things set up, right? So they check your bags, and next morning they're like, yeah, this is not going to work. Everybody, hands up. So you have to just raise your hands and go through the metal detector. And everybody was in. So it was
the airport.
Exactly. No, it was good. It was good. But we're in that's our second episode of Let's Talk podcast. We're back. We're excited about it. First of all, let me ask, do you have a routine on Sunday? Sundays have changed for you. You have to preach every Sunday. What has changed? What's your Sunday looks like? Just let's get people get to know you a little bit. What's Brad Wilson outside, off the stage on a Sunday?
What do I do after church?
After church.
Nothing. I just go. Right now I'm injured, so I got a maimed wing, so I can't really swing a golf club, can't really do much. So usually after church, go home. Right now, the two youngest in the household, those guys are in flag football games. So may go to one of those, but just go back to the house, and I may fall asleep, but usually just kind of unwind. So during the fall, that usually means watching football. There's a lot of sports that's on at our house, but right now, since it's getting nicer, the past couple of Sundays, go back after flag football's over. Everyone kind of arrives back there and just kind of hanging out with the family. We may watch a movie, go outside, do some stuff on the back patio, fire up the grill, and just relax. And then Kyle, who can drive now, he usually tries to negotiate money from me so he can go to Dairy Queen and pick up ice cream for everyone. But it always costs me gas, and
you still pay for everything. You
I
just
still
don't
pay
have
for
to drive
everything.
it.
Yeah. So he thinks he's slick now because he's like, "Well, just Venmo it to me." I'm like, "It's still just take my card. It's the same thing." He's like, "I want the Venmo." I'm like, "It doesn't matter."
Man, that's so good. Listen, I've been wanting to talk to you about this. I mean, we have great conversations during the week preparing for the message. But, even from the conference and experience that we've been having at the church, the bar, because the church, the bar is a little different, right? We have conversations during the message. People participate right there on the spot. But I want to talk to you about self-deception.
Yeah.
Because I think self-deception, it's real, and I think it's more real than people think it is. Because it's us doing it to ourselves. So to you, what is the first symptom that I am actually having a self-deception experience?
Well, I think you could say the first deception or the first step in self-deception is believing that you can't deceive yourself. So I think where they joke, especially with, there's a lot of different jokes that we've heard throughout the years, but, men tend to have this thing of, you think you're invincible. And then when you talk to older people getting older, then it's like all of a sudden one day, you still think you can do things, but your body's like, no, you can't do it. And there's that one day where the light bulb goes off and you realize you're like, oh man, whatever I did the day before, I can't do that again because I can't walk, I can't get out of bed. And so it's like you get to that place where you finally realize, okay, I'm not what I used to be. I'm not invincible. And I think a lot of times for people, whether it's how smart we are, how good we are at things, is we buy in this idea that we could never be deceived, or no one would ever pull one over on us, or we're always it seems like more and more people today, they don't say it, but they think they're the smartest person in any room they're in.
Well, but I can see that though. I mean, and we have a generation coming up that has access to more information than ever before. I think for a lot of people, it's like, I know everything. I can know everything and anything at any time. I just get my phone and I can Google it. Just give me any questions. I can just check here. I have unlimited information right here in my hand. Do you think that's part of the process that the enemy uses for deception? Like it's the belief, like you're saying, is that what it is? It's like, even though I have access to everything, I still can fail?
Yeah, I think that's some of it. And we actually talked about yesterday, the Bible says if you, basically, if you listen to what the Bible says but don't do anything about it, that's not only being a fool, but you're really deceiving yourselves. And so I think a lot of times we mistake information or knowing something for being in a good place, or there's a difference between knowing something and actually like really knowing something and having some wisdom about it. So sometimes I think the fact that we have all this information available to us, it almost gives us a false sense of security, because there's certain things that you can't learn unless you go through the experience.
So yesterday at the Church of the Bard experience, you asked the first question, why it's important to have people in our lives who will tell us the truth. We got stuck on that question a little bit. And I think it has to do with this self-deception item that we're talking about. Because the battle that we faced was, what is the truth? See, how can I define the truth? If I'm having a conversation with you, what is the truth? Like, how we define that?
Well, that's part of the dilemma is in culture today is people want to define their own truth. But where we come from is, at least from the church perspective as Christians, the truth's already been defined for us in the Bible. But that can be difficult at times, because a lot of times our truth surrounds our emotions or our feelings. And so our truth can change situationally.
I know, but can I tell you what I think?
That's what I'm expecting.
Just let me tell you exactly what I think. I think sometimes we mistake honesty with truth. See, my honesty, I can be honest with you. And honesty is nothing but here's how I see, here's how I feel. That doesn't mean that is actually the truth. The truth to me is based on facts. To determine that something is true, that means has to be based on the facts. So, for example, if I look at this microphone and I call a microphone, it's because when I look at it, it's a microphone, and everybody in the room can look at it and say, yeah, that's a microphone. So to me, that's the truth. Why? It's a fact. It's based on fact. But if I look at something and I want that to be something else, I'll be honest with you, that's how I see it. That doesn't mean that's true. Does that track with you?
Yeah, and that's the dilemma we have today is that people don't care about the facts. They just it's a mixture of fact and feeling. So case in point, if we're talking with the guy on the other side of the glass or whatever, and you get there's a number of us that this weekend probably wasted time of our life watching the NFL draft, and you look at that stuff, and then they're debating who is going to be the best quarterbacks or the best running backs or the best wide receivers, and there's the statistics they have, which you say, okay, this is the facts, but there's still the projection, and you can tell with certain things based off what they looked at. It's feelings, and I think that's the danger, or sometimes we encounter. I'm sure with some of the conversations, like at church at the bar, is where you get when people want to mix some facts they mix them in with feelings. That's where it can get a little convoluted.
Well, then the second part is who defines the facts, right? What are the facts? But fact's a fact. So I think sometimes deception comes in us because we may be using the wrong reference to determine what a fact. The thing that gets me sometimes is that when we talk about spiritual things, it feels like it's impossible for the spiritual things to reach my life, my real life, my physical life. I think that's where sometimes this deception comes in, because a spiritual thing is up here and it's never down here in my real life. So I can always, they go in parallel. They never go together. And as a result, I can pick and choose what I'm going to dominate my life, what choices I'm going to make. And I don't know. I think maybe that's the enemy's strategy to set into like, you can make your own decisions. You don't need this thing up here called spiritual life, because you can make your own decisions. You can, and I think sometimes we get those mixed up. It's a mistake we all make from time to time, and that's when we realize. Because don't you think deception comes from our realization that actually I cannot do this on my own? We get frustrated with ourselves in that process.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of people that do think they can do it on their own. Like, I think probably the biggest where a lot of this comes in, and as we've talked about, and you talk about the real life and the spiritual, is people want to have a foot in both places. So I think that's the difficult thing with it is, like, some people like, man, I've never experienced anything from God, or I want to understand this, I want to look to this, and the simple response would be, well, how you want to be a part of both worlds. Like you're not completely committed to. You're not committed to one. I mean, you're committed to. If you're trying to be committed to dual things, it's like that's the thing I think people wrestle with, the commitment to God is, I mean, you either got to be all in, but if you're not all in, then even if you think, like, there's no like half in with God. I mean, you're either all in or you're really all out. And so I think there's a lot of people talk about this self-deception. They think, oh yeah, I'm in with God. And the truth is you're probably actually not, because God's he's the genie, he's the miracle worker. When all the other things fail, then we're like, well, God, I need you to show up.
So you see as like a normal tendency that we have to take over for God when it's best convenient to us and bring him back when, I mean, I get it. I think we naturally have the tendency to go after help only when we need, right? And that's a normal thing we do in life.
Yeah.
So why with God would it be different? And sometimes we measure that way instead of building that relationship with Him ahead of time. I think that's normal. I think if we have a relationship, a friendship that's ongoing, is constant, we're always getting something from each other, and I don't need to come to you only when I need something, when I really need of help. And I think that should be our tendency to have the relationship with God. I think it brings back, the confusion that people make, because if we jump into understanding and realize what's missing, what is missing in our lives, what's the first step? Are we not humble enough to recognize that we don't have what it takes sometimes? So I gotta go and find God. I need to bring God back into my life. I need to kind of like knock the door again and say, "Hey, come back in," because now I don't know what to do. It's like it's humility that's just not part of our daily lives.
Yeah, I've thought this for years, and there's some people that dispute it and they may argue it, but sometimes I feel that when it comes to God, it's easier for people around the world that one of the hardest things to do is to be a committed Christian in America, because you see this idea through the Bible that the powerless, the poor, the widow, the orphan, the weak, like there's this theme from God and Christ, like they're there with them. That we see it in James. It talks about how the brother or sister in humble circumstances, in bad circumstances, poor circumstances, how blessed they are. Like the kingdom of God is flipped over. So like sometimes you go, and I know for me going on these mission trips, I mean, what happens on mission trips is you go someplace we went down to the Dominican, and the American in you kicks in because you see these people that don't have much, and you're like, well, how can I save them? How can I fix them? How can I help them? And you realize that's our draw. That's where we're coming from, is we look at everything through like a money situation or a financial or whatever. And I think the thing with God is, when you look at this humility piece with God, is that's where we get ourselves in trouble and we miss the boat, is we don't fully look to God for everything, because we're like, well, I'll take care of everything that I can take care of. And I think some of that just comes from that what we have. It's difficult to be committed, to really be committed to God as an American Christian. And if you go somewhere and you don't have a whole lot, and you hear the message that, hey, one day there's a great reward, you got this great inheritance, and you're struggling just getting through every day in life, the gospel sounds very appealing, because you're like, yeah, I'll never have this right now and here, but I'll endure all this because, yeah, at the end, if you believe this is what I want.
So you really think socioeconomics play a role in our faith with God?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying I disagree with you, but I think it's a conversation that many churches don't have.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's it's an inch. I just don't know if people would want to be that honest about it. But it's the more you get into the Bible, I mean, you see that clearly.
Well, that's a very interesting point. Here, what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, and I want to dig in more into the socioeconomics of our spiritual life. Let's check on that. Let's talk about that. It's official. CC Life Plus has launched, and we truly feel blessed to be able to reach people in and through the new way of online living. What makes CC Life Plus even more special and better all around is that it is for everyone. This platform has kids content, content for students, podcasts, music, and traditional content to help you grow as Christians. So there really is something for everyone on here. We hope you have had a chance to check it out. If not, please do. We'll be adding new material monthly, and we'll post on the social media channels when we do, so make sure to subscribe and follow our social media channels so you know when new content is released. Hey, welcome back. Let's just jump right back into, because really you got my attention on socioeconomics of our spiritual life. I got in trouble, which is nothing new to you.
That's the norm.
There's nothing new. I got in trouble. I was doing a podcast with a very well-known organization. They invite me to come and speak about online church, and the reason I got in trouble, when I mean I got in trouble, some pastors, the podcast, it was focused on lead pastors. Lead pastors listen to that podcast, right? And they asked me a question about the value of the online church and what's going on, what's the future of the church is going to be. Mm-hmm. And I gave my opinion about the future of the church, but the statement that I made was the American church has walked away a little bit, and a little bit is me being nice. I think it's more than that, but the American church in general has walked away of its mission of a church and has focused too much and become a real estate business. And what do I mean with that? Is that now we build these big properties with big infrastructure, with everything big. And now my goal of bringing people in the church is so I can actually sustain that infrastructure, not for the simple fact that I'm preaching the gospel. I know that sounds harsh, and I know that may sound judgmental for some, but I think it hits the point that you're making about we have a lot of resources, and maybe the resources our cloud, it's a cloud that's getting on the way of what we need to see and do as a church. We lost our sense of mission. I think this might sound a very strong statement, but I think for the church in America, we're preaching the gospel for the wrong reason. It's because I got a big bills to pay, and I need to bring people in. And an example of that is it's the explosion of churches trying to all the tricks to bring people in. It's attraction and the latest speaker that I can bring in so people can come and see. And I have on that. I don't want to say that we get everything right, but the thing I appreciate, Easter is very famous for that, right? Easter is when churches getting competition on social media to report who got the biggest numbers coming in for Easter service. But guess what? As soon as the next week turn around, those numbers don't come back to church, which tells me that we put a lot of effort in highly producing one service to celebrate, which is great. But at the same time, there's no retention there. So all this to say, we got a lot of resources as a country. We got a lot of resources as a church across the country. Are these resources actually helping or just getting on the way? Again, we need those resources. Are we misusing these resources that God gave us here in America to really reach people and preach the gospel and see lives being changed and seeing transformation? Are we really like off track here as a church, Big C church?
That's a good question. I mean, sometimes the answer seems to be yes. Other times you could argue that the answer is no. Maybe it's somewhere in between. But there does seem to be an interesting, like you said, I think that a lot of ways what's interesting with a lot of the churches across the board, like you said, with the Big C churches, there's just a part of me if what I wonder with this, if a lot of it stems from, sometimes I just wonder, do we actually believe that God can do what we read about him doing in the Bible? Can he still do that today? And do we actually believe that not only can he still do it today, but he'd still want to do that today? And I just don't know. Sometimes we view our miracle worker. We see the face of Ben Franklin on $100 bill more so than we think about God doing it. So it's an interesting question. You could probably argue it from both sides, but like you said, I do think that a lot of this reminds me of, for some reason, probably one of my favorite bands of all time, DC Talk. They have this song, "What If I Stumble," right? And one of the things, the lyrics in there is they talk about is I'm not going to sing it because then this thing would just get shut down by the government and churches across the country. But they say, "Is this one for the people? Is this one for the Lord? Do I simply serenade for things I must afford?" So it's like in their brain, that's what they're saying basically is, am I really doing this for God, or am I doing this so I can have the things I want?
Is that like, define religion to me? Like, what is religion to you?
Oh man, the religion, because the church has tried to distance itself. At least like our churches and our brotherhood have tried to distance themselves from religion. Like you think of religion and you're talking of maybe the beliefs, the behaviors, kind of like this just infrastructure that because you believe in a whatever God or gods you believe in, that religion is the kind of like the practices, the verbiage, because of that belief, then it's what your life looks like or should.
That
look
doesn't
like.
sound bad though. Is that a bad thing?
Probably not. But religion's interesting because we've tried to flip it, and a lot of churches try to move from religion because it's kind of gotten with some people it's got a bad rep, and we've tried to change it to relationship.
What I like about our church, because we can get the two sides of the camp on this. You are here every weekend at the Mason campus with is a let's just call it the traditional way of doing church. And then we have the church, the bar, which is a non-traditional way of doing church, because the service there doesn't look like anything what we do here at Mason campus. And I want to compare notes. You probably meet new families every weekend. I meet new families at the bar almost every week, and we got 2 new families came in this past weekend. And I think it's interesting because we're doing this ministry at the bar now for over 3 years. A lot of people came through the church, the bar, but I never met a person at the bar that came to the church, the bar, or even hanging out at the bar outside church service. I have yet to meet a person that to tell me, who is this Jesus you talk about? Everybody I came across, everybody I had an encounter, knows about church, knows about Jesus, knows about God, knows about him, doesn't really know them. Which means I think it would be correct to say that in a way we are very religious people, but for some reason it's missing the relationship with God, and is relationship with God religion?
Well,
real relationship with God, the way the Bible really defines having a relationship with God, is that a religion? Do you need a religion to have that?
No, but I think if you have the real relationship, then you could have more of a real religion.
Got it.
Because that's one of the things that's one of the things we see in. So, and if you look at religion though, that because of this belief of a relationship, this is what life looks like, and that's kind of what we see in James when he talks about religion in chapter 1 is looking after the widows and the orphans. So he's basically saying, religion that God would find faultless would be this. So if you take that word and what it means there, like I think what you said, we've changed it. Like we've monopolized religion in some ways in America. So it's become big business, right? Because you think about radio. Okay, you've got the stations, then you have the religious stations.
Yes.
And then you have don't they?
It's like Christian film.
Yeah.
The worst ever produced film in America is Christian movies.
Like, don't you have? Isn't that what the Dove Awards are? It's like
the music,
the Christian
music,
Christian Grammys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then you have it's become big business with it, or it's like you look at some of the sports leagues. Like we had Upward Basketball here for a long time, and you're using the Christian idea.
Do you think that, because to me that's one of the reasons why the church has become such a controversial part of our society? And I think we have done too much of, here's what's wrong with what you're doing. Come to my side. I know how to. I understand. I know how to do life better. Not we are. Don't, I wish we were that clear, but we're not even that clear. We're just like, hey, you're doing everything wrong. We're the church. We're with God. We know what we're doing. I think we need less face to face with people. We need more side by side.
Yeah,
we've done very little side by side with the people that don't walk with Jesus. But we've done a lot of face to face, and I think that's the reason why we got so much conflict. Lately.
Well, I think and it's kind of been an interesting shift, but I think when you think about it, that the growing up, there seemed to be there was not necessarily an us versus them, but a lot of you were told you couldn't do things, and so there seemed to be some natural distancing that was taking place with churches and other people. It's like, okay, you don't want to engage with these people, you don't want to talk to these people, you don't want to be around these people. You need to be around people because they do this or they do that, they do this, they do that. So it started almost in some ways an us and them.
Well, that in including churches.
Yeah,
including churches. This past weekend, I'm talking to this young man goes to church, the bar every weekend, and he was telling me about a conversation with a friend who goes to a Baptist church. And this friend from a Baptist church asked him last week, said, hey, I think it's time for you to start going to a real church. And this guy from our church, the bar, he was like, hold on, let's do this. You go to my church, the bar, and I'll come one weekend to your church. And the guy said, that's okay. But you know what he said? Because we are church, the bar, he said, let me check with my pastor first to see if you can come. This is like two organizations who claim to believe in God. One meets at the bar. The other one meets in the traditional, well-known church building. And now he's going to verify with his pastor if he can bring somebody from the church, the bar. He's not even asking if he can. I mean, if he cannot bring somebody who attend the church, the bar, much less somebody who's just at the bar, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So how we fix this? Where do we start to fixing this thing? Because is the term religion getting on the way? Is the term, what is happening or what needs to happen for us to fix this and start with us here, Christ Church? How we change this? I
mean, it's very simple, but the thing that would help is if some people actually read the Bible.
Bing! I wish you could drop these mics. They cost money, though.
I know. Well, I don't want to get in any trouble, especially with budgets coming up. You never know what's going to happen. But I mean, as much as you say it, it's just people don't read the Bible. And if some people read it, it's like, you're back in school and they're like, hey, you need to read this stuff. You're like, you're just reading as fast as you can to be done with it. So there's like some stuff you just read to be done, and there's some stuff you read for comprehension. And too many people, they read into the Bible and they try to read in what they want, and they don't read Sometimes I think what would help people is when you read the Bible is to start in the Gospels and read the Gospels and just keep reading them and rereading them and rereading them. Because then you would see you would see from Jesus himself, God in the flesh, you would actually see how he treats people, how he interacts with people, his expectations. And if that was the starting point, that would be great. But sometimes it's just fascinating to me that we go and people will, outside of the Gospels, it's like you have Jesus, the supreme authority in the church in our lives, showing us how we should interact with people. Yet sometimes what we want to do is we'll look to, and no offense to Paul or Peter or James, but we'll look at what these guys say in the New Testament, or even worse than that is this idea that, hey, you know what? Instead of asking Jesus, I'm going to go ask that person, I'm going to ask that leader in my church who they have some mistakes, but apparently they were in the running for the 13th apostle. They just weren't born soon enough. We're going to ask them what they think about stuff. And you just look at it and you think with people, you're like, dude, come on, man. Open up the Bible and read it. That's why I think when James says, he's like, where the whole thing is, don't just listen to the word, do what it says. And we have churches filled with people that back in the day in my Sunday school class, if I knew the memory verse, I got a star. And then I could maybe move Jesus closer to the cross on the flannel graph, right?
I think that's
what they operate with.
Well, and that example from James that you went over this week and made me think of this, made me think of the process to sharing the gospel with somebody. The process of sharing the gospel comes in two parts. The first is actually sharing the gospel as it is.
Yeah.
What we read in the Bible, that's what we got to share with people. But the second part is share our experiences.
Yeah.
See, if I share my experience with you, we're living that out together. And then you can see if what I share of the gospel is exactly how I'm living my life. Mm-hmm. So I think we've done too much of just let me share what the Bible says. Mm-hmm. And we've done very little of let me share my experience.
Well, that goes back to your deception.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's a lot of people, and this is a sweeping statement, so if you disagree, that's great, I don't care. But there's a lot of people that serve in churches as pastors that they're so afraid of if people knew, like if they knew the truth about them, or that they knew that they actually struggled and made mistakes, or that they didn't have it all together, that they doubted at times, that they would lose their influence or whatever. And I mean, I think like you said, the point of it is the power in stories is when you see or when you hear from someone how God has brought them through something or worked in that, that's much more relatable and often understandable than sometimes when we're just trying to rattle off something from the Bible.
I think that's a big source of deception. I think we as pastors, we're held accountable in a higher standard. That doesn't mean we're not going to fall. Mm-hmm. And I think what happens a lot in churches is that people are looking for someone to follow instead of following God.
Yeah.
I think in church, you're like, who am I supposed to follow now? Who's the guy I'm following here? And that's where deception comes in, because guess what? We are going to fail. Mm-hmm. We're going to fail. I guarantee we're going to fail people. But God never fails. And we forget that. And the risk of if you're going to put 100% of your trust in me, there's a good chance deception is going to creep in at any given moment now.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen when you put a trust in God. So stop following pastors. You stop doing this thing about, let me follow the pastor and whatever the pastor says, because God invited you to a relationship with him. Mm-hmm. Now, God has called us to lead his church, to be part of it. And of course, we're going to seek that. We're going to do our best to go after God's heart and do whatever he wants us to do. And we're going to do this together. But I think we would reduce a lot of deception in church when people stop following pastors if they were God, and start just looking at them and people that just like them are just looking after know God better and have a better relationship with God and share what God's doing in their lives. Inside that calling, I mean, do you relate to that at all?
Yeah, no, I think that's a big thing, and that's plaguing the churches today. And you see a lot of it where that's not healthy for the people, and it's not healthy for these pastors, these leaders. I don't think it's a coincidence that as this model is really taken off and risen, that we've seen so many people struggle with that, because there's a pressure and an expectation that is never intended to be on one person. Like you see in the Bible, how the church is structured in the New Testament. It's a term people have heard. People may not be familiar with it, but a plurality of leaders. Like the Bible is very clear. There's one person that you look to. There's one person that is the final authority. There's one person that you submit to, and it's Christ. And everyone else is in this together. And the sooner we recognize, like you said, Joe, we get our priorities placed in the proper spot, the better we're going to be for it. Because I've known far too many people that and this is the sad truth, that they've lost their connection to the church, or their faith's taken a hit because of something that's been said or done or happened to a pastor. And it kind of makes you wonder, man, did you not catch anything from God? And so, and that's part of the reason Satan loves to attack pastors and people that are leading in churches, because, if you want to debate whether or not that people are following these humans, just look at what he does. I mean, if that wasn't the case, he wouldn't attack them.
Exactly.
But people just self-deception. They just know everything.
Well, that's great. Hey, Lou, we'll come back next week. We're going to talk more about what we're going through here. And you're taking us through this journey now of everyday living. It's going to be great conversations, but we'll be back. Continue to check cclifeplus.com. See other channels. We got information here. We got things like for it. We got to get shirt. You got to get the T-shirt, dude. I mean, that's a nice shirt, but it's only for the executive team, which is made for one person. Me.
That's what I figured, because I haven't seen that shirt in any of your other compadres.
But we'll be back here again. We're back every week with the podcast. CisLifePlus.com. And it's for everybody. It's for the whole family. We've got kids, students, music. We've got everything here. We're going to continue to build this platform. It's going to be great. It's just the beginning. We're just in the beginning of building this online platform. A new way of doing online church. We're excited about it. We're good. See you all next week.
Thanks for joining us this week on Let's Talk Podcast. Make sure to check us out at ccliveplus.com, where you can listen to past episodes and subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. And one more thing. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating on iTunes and tell someone about the show. Until next time.